You're listening to 87.1 Caroline Radio. And this is Aaron Richmond. And of course, you're listening to Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we talk about issues in the blindness community. Hey, everybody, how's it going? I'm doing all right, as I like to say, hanging in there. Pretty good day today. I got out in my neighborhood. I got a lot of activity. Did some exercise, which I'll get to in a minute. Aaron's Opinion is, of course, available basically everywhere you get the podcast, from Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it. I'm probably on that platform, along with Twitter, YouTube, and of course, Patreon. You can also visit our Facebook page, which I would recommend because that is where I post everything you need to know about Aaron's Opinion. So we have a very educational guest this evening. We're joined by some of you might recognize the name for a specific reason, but probably not. So we're joined by Tyler Merren, who in our first part of our show this evening, I only want you to focus on the exercise, listener. I want the listener to really be on the edge of their seat for part two. So let's go through this. I first discovered Tyler in a Facebook group, and you posted a video where you basically educate people about what is exercise, how to exercise our body properly, and then you were using certain technology such as the foam roller, as you call it. I am not educated in the field of exercise physiology, so I'm counting on you to educate our listeners all about this. First of all, so how did you get into exercising? You're really interested in it. Go right ahead.
It is definitely a passion of mine. So rewind the tapes all the way back to my birth in 1984. I was born on a farm in Southwest Michigan. Well, I was born in a hospital, but I grew up on a farm in Southwest Michigan, and grew up in a family of athletes. I really enjoyed being active. We had woods and ponds, and my cousins lived nearby. We were always playing some kind of ball game, climbing trees, building tree forts, digging something up. So exercise has just been a part of my life for a very long time. And when I was a kid, 3-4 years old, my parents noticed something a little bit different about me from my siblings. So, I'd come running out of my room and go to run out the front door, and I'd smash into the furniture before I left, knock something over. And I was a pretty rough and tumble kid. So I get up like, oh, sorry, I knocked it over, and I go running, it didn't bother me, but my parents are like, why is this kid tearing up our furniture? So they took me to a specialist, and I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. The doctor said, your son has an eye condition. He's going to lose all of his vision. And unfortunately, this happens from time to time. It's sad, but his diagnosis was not delivered very well. He essentially told my parents that I would be an invalid. He said I'd have to go to a special school. I'd have to be in a special home. I'd have to be taken care of for the rest of my life because I have this vision problem.
Exactly. By the way, I was born in 91, and I'll tell you, I was born with glaucoma, 7 corneal transplants, by the way. Listener,
okay.
you might be surprised when Tyler just said that. Let me just to provide a little bit of education. Up until, and of course everyone in the blindness community is talking about this, but basically up until 1990, the ADA and all of that, up until that time, it was, how do I put this? It was just socially acceptable to a greater degree for many doctors and many professionals to tell parents to send their disabled children to institutions. Whereas nowadays that would be, both socially unacceptable, and who knows? I don't know. A doctor maybe could get in serious trouble if they made a comment like that. But back in 1984, well, that was that was a perfectly inappropriate and a perfectly socially appropriate reaction, and a perfectly understandable thing to say at that time period. Not okay, not acceptable, but I'm telling you, I understand why they would have said it at that time. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was very again, I was very fortunate in that my parents, as tough as that was for them, my dad talks about on the drive home from this appointment, how he had to pull over to the side of the road and just pause for a minute and just kind of breathe and just collect his thoughts, right? And here's his firstborn son. He's got aspirations of star quarterback and all of this stuff. My dad was an athlete. My sister, my other siblings were athletes. It's like, so all of a sudden he's being told, yeah, your son's essentially going to be an invalid. And it was a lot, but fortunately, my parents, they were like, well, we're not gonna stick him in some kind of institution. He's fine. He's, they were like, let's put him in a regular school. Let's put him in, through the paces. Let's have him do all the things the other kids are doing, and let's see how he does. We modified a few things here and there, but I was put in school, and thankfully, I was blessed with a pretty sharp mind, and I excelled without a problem. I was required to do all the same chores on the farm, and just, I might have done it in a little different fashion. We always kind of worked through it. So, as the years progressed on, and again, having retinitis pigmentosa, my vision digressed as I got older. So, fast forward a few years, I'm about 13, 14 years old, and I'm starting to really lose the ability to read my textbooks, to see the chalkboard in school. And it's really becoming a major challenge. And so at that time, I started getting services. I started learning how to use a cane, read Braille, started, getting some of those adaptive services. And so that was great. I really learned a lot about how to function as a person who's visually impaired. But that was also the time that my mobility instructor, the person teaching me how to use a white cane, she said, so there's this camp that you can go to. It's a sports education camp for kids who are visually impaired. And she knew how much I enjoyed sports. And so she gave my parents the form, and they filled it out, no problem. They were very excited about it. And so I went to this camp. It was at Western Michigan University. The first year that I went was in 1999. It was put on by Dr. Paul Ponchilla and his wife. He was a professor in the blind rehab department. So they brought in, and they've been doing it for years. I think the first time I went was like the 20th year that they've been doing it. And they, bring in 40, 50 visually impaired kids, and they teach them how to adapt sports, right? Then it was the coolest thing. We did track and field, and we did swimming, and we did wrestling, and in judo, and we did gymnastics and goalball. Goalball is something that we'll kind of touch on later in the show, right? But it's a sport specifically for people who are visually impaired. It's just absolutely fantastic. So I kind of stepped into this realm of, okay, I love sports. I love athletics. I love exercising. And now I'm being told, absolutely, you can exercise. Being blind doesn't prevent you from doing any of that. You just have to do it a different way. Kind of like, when I was growing up on the farm, and just found different ways to do it. So I started getting better at these sports, especially goalball. I took to it very, very quickly. And so I wanted to learn how to be the best athlete I could be. I enjoyed it. I was traveling a bit with a club team. We were doing some competitions, and I said, how do I get better at this? So I decided that was going to be what I would do for school. I graduated from high school. I went to Western Michigan University and got into the exercise science department, and I got my bachelor's degree in exercise science, became nationally certified in strength and conditioning, just studying how does one exercise. Now, I lay it out like, yeah, I went to school and did it. Like there were some challenges that went along with that. I'm almost totally blind, and exercise science and personal training is not typically a route for people who are visually impaired. Sometimes they didn't really know what to do with me, so I was in there, but I fought through it every time. I was that student, sat in the front of the class, raised my hand all the time, asked questions, talked to the professor afterwards, like, yeah, you put up this diagram. What is this diagram? Okay, we're working on this exercise. I didn't understand it. Can you show me how it's done? So I just spent years kind of slogging through this material and assimilating and understanding, how does the body move? What does exercise do from a physiological standpoint? The anatomy, the biomechanics of it. And so I graduated, and I was like, all right, I'm going to get in the workforce. I became a personal trainer. I worked for 24 Hour Fitness as one of their master trainers for a number of years. About 6 years I worked for them. And what happened about a year and a half ago, and it had been kind of occurring throughout the years as I was a trainer. My wife, who is also visually impaired, we've been married 18 years, and she's totally blind. She's very social. She's on a lot of Facebook groups. She homeschools our kids, and very, very active person. And she would, I'd come home from work, and she's like, hey, I'm on this Facebook group with all these blind moms, right? And so is asking about how to exercise when you're blind. You really got to get on here and teach these people what you know. And I'd be like, I just got done with a 12-hour workday. I do not want to get on here and teach anybody right now. So for years, like I knew this need was there, right? Visually impaired persons, they're really behind the eight ball a lot of times when it comes to exercise. So people who have full vision, they come to the gym, they can look around, it's like, oh, that's how that machine works. I can look at the picture, I can see somebody using it, I can flip open YouTube and just kind of look at how to do a bicep curl. If you're visually impaired, you don't have those options, right? It's crazy challenging to pick up on that. But every once in a while I'd get an opportunity to teach somebody who is visually impaired. 99% of my clientele was sighted, but every once in a while I get a chance to work with somebody who was visually impaired, one of my teammates, and I'd kind of describe to them how to do it. And, and I'd kind of walk them through the process, and like, man, that was just so helpful. And so about a year and a half ago, I had an opportunity to relocate my family. Lived in South Florida for a number of years when I worked for 24 Hour Fitness. The USA team qualified for the Tokyo 2020 games in my sport, men's goalball competition. And so I had an opportunity to take my family to the residency program in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and kind of train a little more full time. And so what this did is allowed me to open up my own business, Revision Training LLC, where now I am actually spending time developing a project, a fitness project, literally to teach people who are visually impaired how to do fitness. Anything from how do you stand up straight? How do you know that your spine is lined up? What are the natural curvatures of your spine? What is internal, external rotation of your glenohumeral joint? What is that, and why is it important to know? All the way to, power cleans and rowing machines and leg extensions and rock climbing and kickboxing and yoga and Zumba and you name it. I'm going to describe it and make it accessible for people who are visually impaired, because access is key, right? I recognize there's a group of people out there like, I don't really care so much about Zumba. I don't care so much about being super fit. Totally fine. That's absolutely acceptable. But you shouldn't be forced into that choice. Make that choice on your own. So I have had a passion for exercise because it's impacted my life in such a positive way, as we'll talk about later on with some of my athletic experience. But I want to pay that forward. And that's what my project is all about.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think, growing up, you touched on a lot of cool stuff. I've played goalball before. I am someone who is not athletic. So I am in perfect health. I maintain good, I am someone who is in relatively okay shape, good shape, but I am not athletic, So I think, and this is something that I think is overlooked, not by you, but by many, is that there's a huge difference between being athletic and being in good shape. Mostly, I think blind people should try to be in good shape, just for the health standpoint.
I completely agree.
Because I mean, you're an expert about it, but the greater chance of a blind person participating at an advanced level in athletics is not as high as it should be, perhaps, but really what is true is if you are not living a healthy life, you're going to have other health problems. So
Absolutely.
that's really where I see the importance. You know, it's great if you're able to get into athletics, cool. But really,